Okay, today I am going to be going through the sounds for our trailer, which is called Atra. Okay, so the first sound which I ended up doing was if I can just see it was so I made some door sounds, which so it was more or less a case of so it was cases of door actual handles moving around. So when to do that, what I started off with is started EQing the sound. So what I ended up doing is I started off with the low end and then just tweaked it downwards, so I didn't have so much low end on it. However, I got rid of the basically the very deep low end because the sound. I noticed that when I had it basically without any effects on it, it basically had too much low end, and I didn't want to have too much of that. I wanted to get rid of that. So what I decided to do is I had the mid bass level up, and then I basically tweaked the mid frequencies, as that's where the sound usually was lying, and then also on top of that, I sorted out the basically high frequencies because it needs to be tweaked. The second step which I ended up doing was to actually fix the overall volume, because the clip which I was using for the sound was the amplitude of the waveform was very low. So to fix that, I had to basically I had to make it more higher volume because you couldn't hear it. So to do that, I basically messed around with the low, mid, and high frequency basically bands to increase the volume of the sound. So when I basically master the sound, or actually no, when I mix the sound inside the mixer, it will basically be a high enough volume. So when depending on what volume setting you have it at, you can hear it, and it's not like a very low sound, even though the amplitude on the sound itself is low, but you can able to hear it. So that's what I ended up doing for that. After that, I started messing around in the mixer just to see. I tried to basically look at different effects I could use. So I ended up adding a fruity limiter because I noticed that it still was a low volume. So I ended up using that just to increase the volume a bit more. And then I went on to the second sound, which was another door rattling sound. Um, However, on this one, what I ended up doing is I again messed around with the low end. However, I got rid of the very deep end and increased slightly of the bass level, and then I kind of decreased the low mid, and then I increased the mid range. But I was just messing around with it just to see how much volume I can actually get out of it. So I was just doing that just to see where I could get, and then I started messing around with the basically kind of middle mid zone, and then I was messing around with the upper mids just to see where I could get the sound to sound a bit more louder, or either to get that more crispiness out of it. So I did that, and then at the end level, I started to basically mess around with the treble, since that's the highest frequency of when you're EQing a sound. So I decreased it slightly, but I was looking at all the different frequency bands, and I was trying to see where it would fit. So I ended up doing that, and then I looked at different effects which I probably could use with it. So I ended up using another Maximus just to increase the volume of the sound, because again, the volume was very low. So when I recorded it, so I had to still increase the volume of each individual basically frequency band, because the volume was very extremely low. So I needed to increase that. And the next sound which I ended up doing was actually some. If I can just see what it. I'm just trying to find what it is, but the next sound was actually a glass sound. So it was actually a glass and clanking. For this, I didn't really need to do much. I just decreased the low end just to take too much of that tension on it. Then I actually increased more left. I kind of decreased the mid zones, and I increased the high zones, because that's where the sound. I noticed where the sound was a lot more prominent. And then the next sound which I moved on to was also I did like basically some opening and closing of drawers and stuff like that. So to do that, I had to I increased more or less of the low end, since that's where the sound was more or less kind of prominent. And then what I ended up moving on to was I ended up moving on to onto the mid zones, and I looked at the low mid and then started adjusting that just to see where the right zones are, and see how it would sound, and then I basically was just trying to try different types of frequency range just to see what would fit and what would actually make the overall sound clear and nice to hit, basically nice to listen to. So I started doing that. And then at the end I basically just started messing around with the treble, so that just to get that right nice crispiness of the sound. And then I kind of renamed it just because I had to do that. And okay, and then I ended up using a fruity limiter because again the actually for this sound the volume wasn't actually that low, but I used the limiter just so I can increase it slightly a bit more because again when you're using some vocal or basically like sounds or like wave format, sometimes the volume of the amplitude of the waveform might be huge or might be slightly big, but the volume sometimes isn't great. So I just basically adjusted that. Okay, and then the next sound which I've moved on to is I moved on to white noise because basically for our trailer because we got some text which basically has got like a glitchy effect. I needed to make some white noise, and mainly because glitchy effects to me, the first thing what comes to mind is more or less like kind of interference kind of sounds, and white noise is an interference kind of sound. So I had to make one of them, and basically I was just messing around with it and basically just trying to see how it sounds, and then I started to get on to basically adjusting it. Now I got rid of the low end mostly. I still kept the low, basically high, basically the mid bass. I still kept that. However, the only thing is that with the sound, I didn't really need to put so much any extra volume on it because the sound was naturally already loud. So all I literally needed to do was just add basically a parametric EQ and then just turn down the volume in the mixer because the sound was naturally already loud as it is. So to fix that, it was just a case of just doing that and make it just so it's not too loud. So when you're when I can adjust it in anything, you can use it with anything and it won't be too loud to use. So that's why I did that. And I went back into the parametric EQ and I messed around with the low mids just to see if I could get the sound a bit more better. And then I think that finished that. The next thing which I moved on to, which was a so the next thing I moved on to was basically glass breaking, which is basically a glass breaking sound. And when I did this kind of sound, I wanted to use this because basically I added like reverb on it, and I wanted it basically the corridor was kind of really big. I wanted to have that all there, so I wanted to have some basically atmospheric sounds to add to the trailer if we end up using them, but I wanted to add some basically atmosphere to the overall potential of the location. So I ended up using one of them, and then I used a parametric EQ, basically a fruity limiter to boost the volumes of the sound. The next thing I ended up doing was basically sorting out the soundtrack. So because I made a soundtrack for the overall for the trailer, I started to just try and mess around with the waveform just to see how much it should be separated, just to, because I wanted it to basically have a little more like gripping effect. So at the end I wanted it to, because it was basically part of like a nursery rhyme. It was one of the Ring Around the Rosie's theme tunes, and I got basically like I got like something where I got like a vocal which it sang it. So what I ended up doing, I saw that I EQ'd the vocal, and then I basically sorted that out. The next thing I moved on to was basically a scream, and the thing is with the scream I had to mess around a lot with the EQing because I had to try and decrease a lot of the midtones, mainly because the amplitude of the waveform was so big, it basically was sounding a bit too drastic, but I had to try and decrease that as much as I can. And what I ended up doing is putting a reverb on it to basically fix that overall sound and make it sound less basically too harsh and a bit more, more atmospheric, so you can hear it in the background instead of hearing it as a very prominent sound, because to me it was just too much. The next thing I moved on to was more or less of a case of it was a key sound and I EQ'd it. The second sound was a door sound, and I EQ'd more or less of the high tones and mid tones, and I messed around with that, and I also boosted it with a maximizer. the other sound I moved on to was also another door sound, and I basically EQ'd it and messed around with the more or less high and mid tones to increase that. And the last sound, which I ended up doing, was if I can just go back to that. Yeah, so the last basically image was basically a sound was actually another soundtrack which I made for the trailer, which we're not currently going to use. However, I made another soundtrack because I wanted to basically see what this soundtrack would be like, and I actually liked the overall atmosphere out of it. So it's something which we could end up using probably in a future projects or something. So basically, I made another soundtrack for that. Okay, for what I will do, all the sounds will be at the end of the video. So
Ring around the rosy, a pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down.